Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to Journey Radio. Our journey is our path on where we are and where we want to go. It helps us to look back and see how far we've come and then make a decision on where we want to go. But most importantly, our journey is a testimony to others that they can do the same thing that we have. Welcome to Journey Radio. This afternoon, we have Connie Lopez Anaya, who will be speaking with us on law and also immigration. Welcome, Connie. Please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you.
Hello, Enid. My name is Connie Lopez Anaya, and I work for a federal government and dealing with immigration. As far as law is concerned, I'm also a law student. I'm about to finish. Yay, one more class to go. And then I'm done. And so see where that takes me.
Right. And I know that one of the directions you were talking about going into was employee law also. Employment
law, yes. Working for such a large agency, there's such a variety, I guess, of relationships and just personalities that you deal with on a consistent basis. And when you're dealing with hundreds of people and employees, there's going to be a clash. There's going to be conflict. And some people don't know the law. Some people do. Some people abuse the law, and some people just don't care that it's there. So that's where employment law comes. And it's very interesting. I've been working with criminal law for a long time, and immigration law and employment law was something that I just had never really even touched until I came about it with my school. And it has intrigued me. And it was that, I guess, that light, that says, whoa, this is something I've never touched on, and how important it is. Finding just the roots, the birth of employment law, where it came from is so important. And not a whole lot of people know about it.
Right. So can you expand a little bit about the roots and the birth of employment law?
Well, it's a long one. Ooh. It's a long birth. But
it's so intriguing the way that you said that.
It is.
I think, like others, I've never really thought there was a beginning or a birth or any depth to it. It was just something that is because there's a need. Right. Of course, there's a need, but why?
Right. And I usually use the word birth because when I was reading about it, it's like a woman in labor, it takes forever. It took forever. And the pains and the growing pains that went with it is just amazing. I mean, it of course, the Constitution is there, and all these protections come from, from the birth of the Constitution. But really, did you know that employment law, or actually the Civil Rights Act, was actually birthed from an employment discrimination case?
Wow.
We all think about the Civil Rights Act as far as your civil rights, your race, your color, your nationality. But it birthed from employment discrimination case against an African American. And from there, Martin Luther King ran with it and other people ran with it. And that's really what birthed the Civil Rights Act. And that's where employment law comes in. Unfortunately, there's not very many attorneys that practice employment law. And what they've told me is there's no money in employment law, Connie. Don't even go there. But I think it's very important. And if money is not an issue, of course, everybody wants money. Everybody wants to live well, but I think there's more to that. I think there's more to it than money. And I myself just have a zeal and don't like bullying and don't like people who abuse other people, especially in employment and agencies. And that's why there's employment law. Unfortunately, there's not very many attorneys, but that's where I'm gearing. That's what I was telling you about, that I'm just keep getting pulled into just soaking myself in employment law. Now I want to know everything about it. I want to know the ins about it. I want to know the outs about it. Because when I stand before somebody, I want to know what I'm doing. And if it's somebody that's being harassed, anybody that's being discriminated against, or about to lose their jobs, I want to be there.
So do you feel like you can be the voice
Yes.
for that person that's defenseless or being bullied or can't speak for themselves or isn't being heard?
Yes. And it's unfortunate that the majority of these employment discrimination cases are people that don't have a voice. It's usually people that are very shy and maybe introverts, and they don't want to shake the boat, they don't want to rock the boat because they're afraid of losing their jobs. I mean, who wants to lose their jobs, right?
Right.
We all have families, we all have children, and nobody wants to lose their job. But then here comes this bully, that is threatening them. And I've seen what that does. I've seen to what people just crying and their anxiety and they start, having all these health issues because of that. That's not right. That's not right. I don't think anybody has the right to do that to another person.
Right. And I know that we speak of having a voice in employment law, but then also the other aspects of your life where you've made an impact in, let's say, immigration, you've also been propelled forward to be a voice for, say, people that would like to be a citizen of the United States.
Yes, there's so many facets to immigration law as well. And I just thank God that I've had the opportunity to learn a lot of those aspects. Like I said, I've worked for immigration attorneys for over 20 years, where we did a lot of defensive immigration law. And then when I started working for the government, I learned how to do employment-based immigration. Then I went on to family-based immigration and citizenship. And so pretty much that covers the majority of immigration, whether you want to immigrate to the United States or become a U.S. citizen. And I know where these people are coming from because I'm an immigrant myself. My family, they're all immigrated. We became naturalized citizens once we were here. But I have to say I am fortunate that I didn't suffer everything that my siblings suffered or my parents had to go through when they first arrived, because by the time I was grown, my older siblings were already had jobs and so forth. And I don't know what it's like to, go to bed without dinner or not having enough clothes or whatever. I can't say I went through that because, like I said, by then, my family was well established. But I do hear the stories, my parents' stories and my siblings' stories, everything that they went through, the discrimination, the injustices, the hunger, working hours, 12, 15 hours that my dad worked, and then they would let him go and they wouldn't pay him. Because they said they would call immigration on him. And even though he was here legally, my father was illiterate and not very educated. So he was afraid that they would take away his work authorization. So he'd leave after putting down buku hours a day. I mean, who does that? And so I've heard these horror stories, and not just from my family, just from different people. And it can't be just a coincidence because I've heard that story many, many times throughout the years that I've worked with immigration. So it's not something that somebody invented. It has happened. I am a firm believer and I am convinced that it has happened and people out there have suffered these injustices.
Right. And that right there alone gives you a passion.
Yes.
Or, just propels you forward. That's my word of the day, by the way, propel you forward to actually want to do something about it. So can you give us a story about your family's journey into the United States, becoming citizens and getting the work authorizations and things like that?
I'm gonna give my story here because that's usually what I do when I do naturalization stories, except I do it on a third person, but now you're going to hear it first from the first person. Well, My father came to the United States in the 50s. And back then, during the 1950s, there was an immigration program, a workers program called the Bracero Program. And what they did is they would recruit foreign workers to come and work in the fields, in the crops in the United States. My father had a very good job in Mexico. My mother was had a decent, she came from a very decent family. So there was really no need to come and work in the fields, if you really look at it. But my father wanted a better life for his kids, and he wanted a better future for us. And so he decided to come and work in the crops. Now, my father was Policía Federal, which was the federal police back then. It was a pretty decent job back then. And he left that, to work in the crops, to work in the fields and, 100-degree weather in the mud and everything else because he wanted a better future for his family. So he did that. And after a while, he immigrated. And what he did is he would save a little bit of money, and then he would go back to Mexico, and he'd get my oldest brother, which wasn't much older. I believe the first time he brought him to work with him was probably about 8 or 9 years old. So we're talking about little kids. You do that with little kids now, they'll put you in jail. But he brought his, my oldest brother, and put him to work, and they worked and they saved money. And then he would save money and go back and pay for the next one and bring the next one. And he did that 9 times. He did that. I'm the second to the last. I have a younger sister. So my mom, my younger sister, and I are the last ones that he immigrated. But it was very hard. My mother would tell us stories that she would go months without hearing from my dad. Imagine being in another country with your husband, not only your husband, but your children. Don't know where they are. Don't know if they're alive. Don't know if they've eaten. Don't know if they're okay. Because remember, back then, there was no cell phones. There were no faxes. There were no phones. The only thing they had was a telegram. And since my dad was illiterate, I'm certain that he probably got ripped off enough times that he had to wait. When they would move them from one field to the next, he had to meet somebody else and be able to gain some trust on somebody that he could trust so that he could give him money to send in a telegram to his family in Mexico. So my mom says that there would be months without knowing what's going on, what happened. She says, and then all of a sudden she would get a telegram. She says, and he would send money. And she says that was the only communication they had. So he did that for many years, and she said it was really difficult because when he would try to immigrate somebody, again, there was no faxes, so everything had to be done manually. So, and everything was dated. So if they took a birth certificate, by the time the next document they came in, that one was already expired. So they had to go back and get another current one, and submit it. So it would take years to get immigration, to be able to qualify for immigration. But he did it. He did it. And he immigrated all of us the right way. None of us were here illegally, not even my father. So we all immigrated here legally, and we grew up here. We all got our education here, and it's all because of him, because he was determined. And, a lot of people say, well, your mom, what did she do? My mom was my dad's support because when he was working here, she was, imagine raising 9 kids by herself and 6 boys to boot. I had 1 boy and 1 girl, and that was enough. This is cut it, snip it. I can't do this. But I think she was the strength, she was the core. And she was the one that encouraged my dad and stood by him all those years. And just supported him and stood by him. And, they reached their dream. Mm-hmm. They reached their dream. And my mom, when she came to the United States, and she didn't want to leave her country, of course, her family, everything else, and everything that she was, she pretty much lived pretty well. And that's something that I always think about when I see pictures of my mother under the grapevines, and there's cobwebs, in her hair, and she's under these fields and in the mud and stuff. It's like, my gosh, I don't know if I would do that for my husband. But she did, and she did. And she stood by him. And she was there. She'd get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and make lunch for the day. And that included making tortillas at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, fresh tortillas every single day. Her and my older sister would make fresh tortillas so they could make the burritos, so that was their lunch for the day. And then they'd be all off to work. And as far as I remember, we were in Oregon, we were in California, we'd come back to Arizona. All I remember is the car, because I was very little, but I just remember these endless trips. And my dad would follow the crops, and that's, so I understand when people say, you have no idea. Oh, yeah, I do. I do have an idea what you're going through, what you've been through. Mm-hmm. So, yes, it's very important that I think it makes a world of difference if you understand where people are coming from. And no, they're not thieves, and they're not prostitutes, and they're not criminals. These are hardworking people that just want to come work and make a better living for their families.
Yeah. So then your story, how does it impact your life? How does it give you strength?
Oh, my goodness. Well, when things get hard, I always look back to my dad, and if he could do it without phones and cells, without speaking the language, didn't know how to read or write, but he had determination. He had a lot of determination and resilience because he had set his mind to do something. Now, there's a story that goes that my mother's oldest brother in Mexico, when he first decided to come to the United States, he told her, "Oh, you'll be back in less than a year." I said, that was the worst thing he could have said to my dad, because that's probably what held him here and says, I'm not going back. But no, he was just determined. And I think throughout his life, he was just a very, very hardworking man. And he loved his family. He protected his family. And I think that's what really gives me the strength. Because if he could do it in that era without all the assistance that we have now with media and education and, opportunities, who am I to say, no, I can't. I can't do that. Because if they did it, why? I don't have a right to say I can't. I have to. That's just something that my siblings and I have always made sure that the younger ones, the next generations, understand where they came from. Most of them were born here. They don't know what it's like to go without food. They don't know what it's like to work in the fields like their dad did at 8 years old, in a country, in a place that he didn't even know. They have no idea what that's like. But we make sure that they know, and we tell them the stories. We owe this to your grandfather, your grandmother. This is where they came from. Don't you forget it. Their sacrifice, their hard work, their commitment to follow the law is the reason you're here and why you have all these opportunities, why you live in a nice house and why you have this education and why you drive these nice cars. Because first they set the example to work hard and to follow the law. You have no excuse, because if they did it, we don't want to hear your excuse that you can't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I remember how hard my grandmother and grandfather worked, but then it's like it's ingrained in the children. Mm-hmm. Of course, I work like a maniac, but then I look at my children. My daughter's working just to make her business what it is today. Mm-hmm. Do you see that? It's almost like they've inherited that gene. Sure. It's a gene. Sure. And when you look at your kids and your nephews and your nieces and go, wow, they're just like their grandfather or like their grandmother. We're tirelessly working.
Yeah, and I think being a role model also is so important, because if we have the gene but we don't put it to good use and put it in action, they could have the gene, but if they don't know how to do it, they're not going to do it. Trust me, I have tons of nephews and nieces. It is like, what gene pool were you from, But then I see the ones that the ones that say, oh my gosh, here it comes. Watch out for this one. This one's going to do something
Mm-hmm.
because we could see it. But I think being a role model is as important as that gene that runs through your veins. It's so important to say, I can do it. And that's really the bar that I have tried to set. I was the first one that graduated from my family, from my siblings, from high school. I was the first one to go to college. I was the first one to graduate from college. And I think that set the bar for my nieces and nephews. And when I went back to school for my bachelor's, and I finished my bachelor's, and I told my daughter, okay, now I've always told my kids, if I can do it, I expect you to do more. If I get this far, that means you're going to go farther. And the high school is not an option. You're going to go to college. And so my daughter loves school, but when I said, okay, I'm done with my bachelor's and now I'm going for my master's. And she's like, when are you going to stop? So
she wanted to know how far she had to go.
How far the bar was going to be set,
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny now, but, and it just made me think, if I stop, that means that's as far as the bar is going. I'm in my old age, I'm about to finish law school, and it's because I believe that it's never too late to get an education. Not in this country. You may be other countries, and I speak to family from Mexico all the time, and they're just, I don't know if it's appalled or just shocked to hear that somebody my age, is going to school again, but it's just a matter of, I said, I never get tired of learning. I never get tired of learning. Mm-hmm. There's always something new to learn. And again, that bar my parents set to be successful in whatever you do. That's the bar I've set for myself. And if I can help and be that role model for my kids, for my siblings, for my nieces and nephews and their children, then so be it. It'll be the aunt that died going to school, but but you know what? That's the bar. That means you don't stop going to school until you die.
Yeah. Doesn't it keep you moving forward, actually?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think education is just the strength in anybody. It really helps your personality. It helps your self-esteem. Just knowledge.
Right.
Just knowledge in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the last 2.5 years that I've been going to school, it has increased my knowledge and my confidence in what I'm doing. And, when people tell me you can't, I just smile and I said, watch me, because I know I'm confident. And when I go and represent somebody, because they're being harassed or whatever, I walk in there with full confidence because I know the law. I know what it is. And if it isn't, I'll tell them, this part right here, we're going to have to settle on this because you're not going to get anywhere. But this part, we're going to fight and we're going to win because the law says we can win. So that's the confidence that I like. And, for so many years, I was just so frustrated. It's like, how do I do this? How do I win? How do I get beyond this? And then I realized it's education. They're just more prepared than I am. So what do? I go prepared myself. And beyond that, I want to know more than they know because I want to be 1 step, 2 steps ahead of them. So when I'm in front of them, I'm confident and say, nope, can't do that. No, you can't. The law says this. And I love to see the look on their faces because what's this little Mexican girl telling me I can't, Yeah,
I love it. I think that's kind of your way out is what everybody look at. I know in the African community, mm-hmm. African American community, that's the way we look at it also is that education mm-hmm. is what actually gives you the power. And mm-hmm. I remember when I realized that when somebody said, okay, if you get your bachelor's, when you finish it, you're going to double your salary. When you get your master's, you're going to double it. That was kind of empowering for me. Mm-hmm. And then too, I looked around and I saw people with an education or with a profession, how that they had a little bit more power, a little bit more leniency, or a little bit more opportunity mm-hmm. than someone who didn't.
You're treated different, aren't you?
You're treated differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You are.
And you feel different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I just remembered that my dad once told me, and he knew I liked school, so he would encourage it. But one thing that I never forgot, and he says, never stop learning. He says, education is the most important. And I remember what he said. He said, they can take your car, they can take your house, they can even take your husband away, but they can never take your education. Mm-hmm. He says, you will always fall on your feet if you have an education. And I think that was probably my driving force. After, it was hard when I was raising my kids because I was a single mom. But once they graduated from high school, that was it. That was my bar right there. And I remember that day that my daughter graduated, I said, okay, I've done my part. You have a house. You have a roof over your head. I promise to keep a roof over your heads and anything you need, as long as you follow my rules. But now I need to go finish what I started. And that's when I went back to school.
Yeah. So how do they look at you? I know sometimes my kids, they surprise me because they are proud if you're moving forward and you're accomplishing things and they're willing to help. How do your kids look at you? What do they say from time to time?
There's a sense of pride.
Yeah.
I can see it. My son, he's a sergeant in the Air Force, and you see this big burly guy, and when I say no, he says yes, ma'am.
So empowering. Yeah.
And I can see the respect. I can see that not only because that's just something that we've taught our children. You respect your elders, you respect your parents. And we set that I guess that example with our parents. They never saw us disrespect our parents. My mom, till the day she passed away, she's 96, but she still told my brothers, do it now, and they did. She said, jump, we jumped. So it was that, respect, that I taught my kids the same way. But I do see it, I do see it in my son and my children that they were just happy. They were, I guess, felt confident to say, this is my mom. And I could see it in their face and I could see it in their smiles saying, this is my mom, so that it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling that, when you're raising your kids, you're not really sure if you're doing the right thing or you're doing it wrong or doing it right,
That's
but
true.
you try your best. But then when they finally grow up and be adults and you can sense that pride, this is my mom and this is my family and this is what, there's a sense of, I belong to this, this is who I belong to. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. It wasn't easy.
No, it's not easy.
But, it's a lot, like I still tell a lot of friends, it's a lot easier to let them do whatever they want. It's a lot easier to say, no, you don't have to go to school. It's a lot easier to say, just let them do whatever they want because they're 18. And, I've told my kids many times, I say, you guys never saw me crying, after I scolded at you and yelled at you and disciplined you. And you guys never saw me go lock myself in my room and cry because I was being both the mom and the dad. I said, but I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I did because I did, when one of my sons, I think I was in a teacher conference one time. It was a gymnasium and all the tables were around the walls. And I went up to his first class teacher and she goes, are you Joshua's mom? And I said, yes. And she goes, wait here. And the first thing I did was turn around and looked at him and said, what did you do? And he's like, I did nothing, Mama. I didn't do anything. I promise I didn't do anything. And then I said, this better be good, Josh. So she comes back with like 3 or 4 other teachers. And they say, we want to know what you do. And I go, what are you talking about? She says, he's just the best mannered kid. He's so respectful. He's always helping the teachers. Says, we just want to know how you do it. He says, what are you doing to this kid? And I said, I carry a big stick. And they laughed, and I said, I'm serious. And then, not a physical one, of course. But yeah, I was very strict on my kids. But, of course, with a lot of love. But there was many times that I used a lot of tough love. And I think that's what's lacking in a lot of families.
Yeah.
And there's such young parents now, and they want to be their friends. You know, I always told my kids, I said, I'm not your friend. I'm your mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. That's your friends.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And if you don't like it, I'm still going to tell you what you need to hear. And then you're going to do what I tell you to do. So, it's tough. It's tough. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be the mom that, went and hugged him and kissed him after, they had some discipline or whatnot. But I didn't have that luxury.
Mm-hmm.
I had to stay firm because I didn't want my kids going in the wrong direction.
Right. Because I think it's right now or in the moment, it seems hard. But I remember this is one of my rare moments. I do this from time to time, if you know me. But I remember being at LA Fitness in the shower, and I heard this conversation this mom was having with somebody else, and she's like, I just give up. And I remember how hard it was. It's always that 6 months before graduation, they think everything's over. And it's like, no, you need to keep the grades up so you can finish. But she was like, I'm so done. I don't know what else to do with her. And I couldn't step outside the shower because I was in the midst of washing. And I'm yelling, you cannot give up. You cannot give up. You go to school with them. You do whatever you have to do. Take them to school, but you cannot give up because if we do that, we're giving up on our future, of them having a job, of them being able to raise their children or to lead their household, just simple things like that. And so that's a passion of mine, probably education and children. And my
so
kid.
Important. I recently heard this blurb, I guess, that says, if you raise your kids, you get to spoil your grandkids.
That's true.
If you spoil your children, your kids, then if you spoil your kids, then you get to raise your grandchildren. Isn't that true?
It's so true. I see it over and over again.
Over and over again. Yeah. And it just stuck with me. And I said, that is so true. And I see it in my own family,
Right.
But what can you do? It says you try to do the best that you can. And it's like, okay, mine are safe.
Yeah. And then it's always a good testimony with, I think the other day somebody told me, oh, your son is such a leader. I have him in my class and he doesn't talk a lot. If you know my people, they don't talk a lot. But when he does speak, people listen.
Yeah.
Or either just yesterday, I was in a meeting and they said, oh, your daughter is such a good person. She's doing such good things. And I went, and that right there, you don't see it because you're there all the time, every day. But to hear somebody say it, it's like, wow.
Doesn't that feel great?
I know, I did something right. Thank you. Because sometimes I did. I go, God, please tell me what to do.
Oh, yeah.
And I take the idea and I just went with it. And now I'm so happy that, he made it happen. But I'm listening to you and I'm seeing this authentic person and communication and leadership and whatever. How does that help you to help others or to communicate with others? There's
just this great desire because I've seen it happen. I think I've seen it work.
Yes.
So I just try to encourage people. It's the same thing that you were doing in the shower. No, do not stop now. This is a time where you need to keep going, and there's just something in me that likes to encourage people to do that. And I said, no, look, let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
And I got plenty of stories, believe me, but I tell them, this is what happened. This is what I did. Didn't work. Oh, yes, it did work. Don't stop. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. And just recently I ran into this very young couple. He has a daughter and she has a son and they're not married, but they're, trying to make it work. But they're still teenagers. They're not age-wise teenagers, but in their mind, they're teenagers. And, they're in love and they want to party and they want to, do what young couples do is like, and I said, hold on. You got two little ones right here. You guys decided not to be teenagers a long time ago. These two are your responsibility, not anybody else's. Oh, but that we're young. Yeah, you are young. So are they. So I probably am the mommy dearest of the family because, I bring them back and I reel them in and, some like me, some don't. But, I think the words always stick in their minds. And I always say, if you don't take care of it now, you're going to reap the consequences later.
Mm-hmm.
You do good things now, you're going to have good consequences. You do bad things now, you're going to have bad consequences. Right. So don't come back 20 years later and say, oh, my kid, I can't stand him. Don't know what to do. Okay, you're going to remember this day.
Mm-hmm.
So, that I always kind of put it in perspective. I can't make them do it. But I always, as one of the older people in the family, I always tell them, I've seen it. And one nephew of mine just recently, is going through China and says, remember what I told you when you were a teenager? Yes. And I go, what did I tell you? That I and only I was going to reap the consequences of all of my decisions. Yeah. I said, did it work? Yes. I was trying to stop you back then. I said, you didn't listen. Now these are the consequences, because now you can't get a job because you did this. Now you want to do this. You want to go to school. You can't go to school because you did this. Those are the consequences of the decisions that you made. Now, you either change it, because the next 5 years are going to be exactly the same way as the last 5 years. So you change it now, or just keep living the way you're living. And then, you know what? 5 years I'm going to talk to you, you're going to be saying the same darn thing all over again. And if you have 5 years after that, and if it's up to you to change it. So hopefully, he says he's going to school. Hopefully he's changing it. It's hard. It's hard. It's really hard for him, especially when doors don't open that easy anymore. But I'm hoping that he realizes that the consequences are grave when you make the wrong decisions. And, as a family, I told him, we're standing right here by you. We'll support you. We'll push you. We'll do whatever it takes to get you there. But we're not going to carry you. We're not going to do it for you. You have to do it. So hopefully, he does get back in line and gets back into that road and makes a future for himself. And I'm really praying that he does.
Yeah. So what impacts have you been able to make in the community? Let's say in Nogales and Tucson, Phoenix, the capital.
Well, as you can tell, I have no problem saying my voice, but speaking my voice. I've been given a lot of opportunities, and one of the opportunities that I had with my job was to be the community relations officer. And what I did is go around in my community, and I would do workshops, just speeches or just teach people about immigration. I think there's so much misinformation out there, and people who claim to know immigration and they don't. And they give these people the wrong information. Then they go before an immigration officer and they lie. Now they're live under oath. Sometimes it's not so much what they did. Some people think that they can't become a U.S. citizen because it's a DUI. Excuse me. It's not that. But don't deny it under oath, because now that's what's going to keep you from being a U.S. citizen. Not the DUI in the 1970s. You're lying right now. Because that in itself puts doubt on anything and everything you say at that moment. So if you lie about that, how do I know that the rest of this interview is going to be true? That's what you're looking at. So that opportunity that I had, and I really enjoyed it. I stood in front of people, and hundreds of people would come. Nogales, these border towns are very unique. I grew up in Nogales, so I know. It's very unique in a way that if you're not from there, if people don't know you and who you are, they're not going to open those doors for you. It's that easy. You have to be from there. You have to speak the language. I could speak to somebody from Nogales and you will never understand what I'm saying. Because we have kind of our own lingo. It's kind of crazy. I was just talking to my best friend about that. But a lot of doors opened up for me because my family has been living there for a long time, and they were involved in the community as well. And so I these doors would just open up. Government, the consulate, they would just open their doors, and I would do these presentations and teach people, and they had questions, and I would answer their questions. And they said, well, that's totally different than what this person told me. And I said, well, you can take my word for it, or you can take somebody else's word for it. But I'm telling you, this is the way it works. So I was able to help a lot of people, and it's very, very rewarding. One lady came after that, and she became a naturalized citizen. she told me, she says, you don't recognize me. And I said, I'm sorry, ma'am. I said, I see people all the time. You know, you look familiar. I said, but I really don't know who you are. Anyway, she told me that she was one of the persons that came up to me after one of the workshops and the presentations. And then I gave her the information how to become a U.S. citizen. She says, I followed it to a T, she says, and here I am. I'm a U.S. citizen. And I was like, wow, you know, that was pretty cool. And she says, you were the reason that I became a U.S. citizen. She says, you encouraged me. You told me how to do it. She says, and I did it. And so it was just awesome. You know, it's so rewarding to see people do it the right way. That's what I always tell people. Do it the right way. Yes, the other way is fast. But why? You know, you're going to live with this regret and this guilt that that the truth is going to be found later on. And we will find it eventually. I said, in all those years that you put in here, I said, you can get deported for something like that. Just do it the right way from the very beginning. That way you take that burden off your shoulders and you get to live in the United States for the rest of your life. I said, why not do it the right way? Yes, it's easier. Yes, it may be cheaper. You know, it may be faster, but it's not the right way. I said, do it the right way. So I'm always encouraging people. I said, follow the law. Follow the law. Do it the right way. Trust me. Our Constitution works. Our immigration laws work. Do them. Follow them the way they're supposed to. So I always get kind of twisted when I hear the media or I hear in the radio that our immigration law is broken. No, it's not broken. It's not broken. The laws are there. We just need to enforce them. We just need to apply them. That's it. If we just apply them the way they are. And yes, some of them need to be, I guess, updated, you know, because a lot of these immigration laws are old. And they need to be updated, I guess, to fit our modern world. But not much. Not much. I really do believe if everybody follows the way it's supposed to be, and it's not that hard if you do it the right way. Again, it is time consuming. Yes, it is. It's expensive. Yes, it is. Anytime you deal with the government, you're going to deal with money and cost.
And time.
And time. So, you know, that's no exception. But yes, it's awesome. It's awesome to see the reward. It's awesome to see. I was in one of your workshops. You taught me how to do this. I was in one of your naturalization ceremony. I just heard the other day that this lady that was at my hairdresser, and she said, you did my ceremony, my naturalization ceremony. It's kind of scary, you know, because I don't know who these people are. and I did. And she goes, you know what? She says, I've been to other ceremonies after mine. She says, and none of them has been as good as mine. She says, I loved my ceremony. You were the one that did my ceremony. Why don't you do the ceremonies? And I go, you need to go talk to my boss. I said, I love doing ceremonies. I love community relations, and I love teaching, and being able to give people the right information so they can get what they want. A lot of times, I just spoke to a man not too long ago, and he said the same thing, and he was very scared. They're always very scared when, of course, you're coming into a federal building in front of a federal officer. They're going to be scared. He's very nervous, but he's got a lot of good ideas. He was an educator in Mexico, and he wants to get his degree here, and he wants to educate, and he wants to help people, kids with drug problems and so forth. And so I told him, I said, that's awesome. That it's very admirable what you're trying to do. And one thing that I just want to touch on is that's very important. I think all kids, all teenagers, even parents, we're up to this with drugs, educating drugs, rehabilitation, teaching them about drugs, teaching them say how to know the drugs, teaching them don't say that, don't drink, don't smoke, don't drink. All of us are just fed up with all of that. So I had been thinking, and I told this gentleman, I said, can I give you some advice? I said, just because I know our culture, and he was Hispanic. The one thing I do not see in these kids that have been brought to the United States as children or have grown up in the U.S., I said, parents have forgot to show them their culture. They have forgot. I said, they came to the United States and they started adopting this culture, that culture, and they forgot their original culture. Mexico has a beautiful culture. I was just reading something that says Mexico is not just a word. Being a Mexican is not a word. It's a word of culture. It's a word of pride, and a lot of years, and a lot of history. So I said, teach them that. Teach them where they come from. Teach them to be proud of who they are, because I think that is the foundation so that kids don't deter. If they know a foundation and they know where they came from and it's a solid foundation, I said, I think it'll work more than teaching them and drilling them. Don't do this. Don't do drugs. Don't do alcohol. Don't do this. I think so. So anyways, that's my take on it.
Yeah. And I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about the different cultures and the history. Our mutual friend, Georgina, she was teaching me about some of the past presidents and things like that. And the current president is very impressive, the way that he's putting the people in the forefront. And that being said, when we know ourselves, then we're more likely to have more self-care and self-love. And also it kind of mitigate that thing where we're talking about suicide, or we're talking about drug use or abusing our bodies in any kind of way. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's a sense of belonging.
Right.
It's a sense, and we're talking about education too.
Right.
It's a sense of belonging. You have an education. Nobody can take that away from you. That's part of you.
Right. It's right here. It's in your mind. It's in your brain. You die, you're going to go with it. It's coming with you.
Culture's the same way. It's a sense of belonging.
Right.
I am who I am, and I tell everybody I'm a United States citizen. I follow the laws of this country. My father taught us that we came to this country to work and to follow the laws. Never does anybody say, and the government will never tell you, you need to change your culture. You need to change who you are. That's not what America is. And that's the beauty of it. I said, we all different cultures and different nationalities. The bad thing is that people come to the United States and they forget all about that. I said, and that's where we go wrong. I said, teach your children their culture. Give them a sense of belonging in that foundation. And I really, really believe that they won't go astray that way.
Right. Because America, I remember them telling us when we were growing up, it's a melting pot. And when you think about the melting pot, there's a lot of different cultures, and that's what makes us so strong. It's because we come from Mexico. That right there, our ancestors there have a lot of strength. And then we come from Africa. Then we come from France. We come from England. And we come from all of these places that have these amazing history. And then imagine if you put that all together, how much greatness you'll have.
That's awesome.
That's diversity.
Yeah.
Diversity of thought, diversity of culture, diversity. And oh my goodness. Yes.
You're talking about genes,
Genes,
think about all that power in those genes, all that brain power.
Yes.
And experience, because a lot of them come down from generation to generation,
Yeah.
And like I said, my father taught me a lot, even though he was a very stern, quiet man. I learned a lot from him, not saying a lot of things, but, just following his example. Yeah, my brothers did too. He wasn't the type of man or father that came around and hugged everybody and said, I love you, son. I love you, daughter. But he showed it, in many different ways, to the way that we admire him to this day. Nobody can talk bad about my dad. Because that's how we respect him. We still respect him to this day.
It's quite amazing to watch, different lives. Like, you're seeing your dads from beginning to the end. And then I think about my dad from beginning to the end, and then all the people that they touch. And then at the end of their lives, people are still remembering. It's like, wow. And I'm thinking about your dad, and all I can think about is the grit, the tenacity, the family love, something that a lot of people can draw on right now. Just, you got a cell phone, you have internet, you have a job. And if you treat your family at this level, anything like your dad did, think about how great.
Imagine that. Yeah.
What an amazing family. Yeah. What amazing legacy.
And like you said, the impact. Because he didn't leave money.
No.
He wasn't a millionaire. He didn't leave all this, wealth or anything to his kids, but he left something very important, and that was a legacy, and that was him. And, people ask me that, what are you going to do with your law degree? What are you going to do this? You can make more money at this. Of course I want money. Of course I want to live better, whatever. But when I compare that to the legacy my dad left and without any money, without any wealth, that's how I want to go.
Right.
I want to be able to leave a legacy that remembers what I did for my community, for my family. That's what I want.
Right.
The money is just secondary.
Because I think actually when you're thinking about it, and I think about what your dad left with you, and you're still quoting your dad, and you're still passing that information on to your children, on to your nephew, and now he's in school and he's doing, so your dad's legacy is still living on through you. Yeah. And then your nephew remembers exactly what you said about, oh, remember 5 years ago when I told you that what you do today is going to impact tomorrow? And when he has his nephews and his nieces and his children, I guarantee you he's going to pass.
As usual. I had an aunt that said this. Yeah, that's really what matters. It's family. The family is the most important. Yeah. And everything else falls underneath that. And I think if we can all leave a legacy like that, and just one small thing in each one of them, I think it's worth the life. I can actually die and say, you know what, I did something, I contributed something to this family. So,
I made a difference.
I made a difference, right?
And so I know that you're also a steward of a union. And what makes you do that? Because when I remember steward, I remember my father-in-law saying, okay, the steward is the one that, they don't worry about what they have to lose. They don't worry about anything. What they're doing is speaking for the masses. They step forward, the single person, and speak for everyone.
I wish I would have known that before I jumped in.
I know, you just said, oh yeah, I'll do that.
Because that's exactly what I did. But it is, I'm a steward with the American Federation of Government Employees. It's the AFG, and one of the largest federal union. I am a steward in our office, and that's really I mean, if you would have told me that, before I became a steward, I would have probably thought about it, but that's exactly what I am. And I guess destiny follows me everywhere, right?
Right.
And that's really what I do. I represent people and I defend them for the masses, whether you're union members or not. And that's kind of a zeal that I have, and again, the bullying and, the abuse of authority it just strikes me the wrong way, and when I see somebody that can't defend themselves or they're scared or they're afraid of losing their jobs, it just brings this, I guess, righteous anger inside of me. And I said, don't be afraid. I'm right here.
Yeah.
I'm right here. I got you. And we're going to do this and we're going to fight. No, you're not going to lose your job, And so I guess I fell into the right place. And really, I was telling you about how my family was they worked in the fields and the crops and stuff. My older sister, at a very young age, probably 14, 15 years of age, she was kind of pulled into a union back then, and it was a farm workers union, and that was the Cesar Chavez union. That's what he started. And my sister actually walked with Cesar Chavez, and she interpreted for Cesar Chavez. She spoke both languages, so she would go to court with a lot of the farm workers if they had an issue, tickets or whatever they did, and so she had that heart, to defend people, and she just stepped in. And at 14 or 15, I don't know if I could have done that at that age, but she did. She was very tenacious and she defended them at that age. So much so that the senator of Oregon at that time, when my family decided to move back to Arizona, he wanted to adopt her and put her through school because he saw just what she could become. He saw so much potential in her. Of course, my dad would never, and especially his little girl, she's coming with me. But she did. And I think ever since then that I've heard the family talk about the marches and with Cesar Chavez and what he did, and what he would do with the people and what he fought for. And they were farm workers, so they knew. And again, I told you at the beginning that, I was talking about how many times my dad would work, for weeks at a time, 12, 15 hours a day. And then the farm owners would tell him, well, we don't need you anymore, leave, without any pay, and he didn't know any better. He didn't know he was here legally. And they would tell him, we're going to call immigration. Even though he was legal, he didn't know any better. He thought that they could still call immigration and take his green card away. So he would leave without pay. You know, he had 9 kids to support. You know, how do people do that? You know, how could they have a heart to do that? So that is something that just engraved in my heart. And when I see injustices like that, I always think of my dad, you know, what he went through, you know, and I see older people and working and, you know, their hands are scarred and they're hardworking people, and people take advantage of that. It does. It brings us just a righteous anger inside of me that I can't stand to see that. And that's part of the union. You know, that's part of the union, to defend people from injustices, from abuse, you know, from abuse and people that abuse the law and abuse employment law. And that's what I tell you, there's that anger that rose inside of me, is like, I want to know everything there is about employment law, because when I walk in there, I don't want anybody to have one hand over me. I want to be able to say, nope, can't do that. Or yeah, you can do that, but, you know, be able to defend somebody. And I was really, really proud that I defended somebody not too long ago from the Office of Investigation. And the guy was a young guy, and he's nervous and he's shaking, you know, and it's okay. It's going to be all right. I walk in with these 2 big burly guys, you know, with suits, and they're very intimidating, but I was confident. You know, I just walked in and, you know, and they would ask certain questions. So you can't ask that question. Go on. Next. You know, or he already answered that question. Next, you know, and I prepared the guy, you know, my guy is like, watch for my cues. Don't say more than what, you know, they ask you. So I prepared him really good, you know, and we walked out of there. It felt good. You know, it felt really good, you know, to the point where, you know, these guys shook my hands and said, have I met you before? And I go, no, you haven't. But, you know, that's the confidence, you know, that's the confidence that I want every time I go in there. Yeah. Every time. And you know, sometimes it's uphill. Most of the time it's uphill. You know, I feel like that salmon, you know, just trying to get, you know, against the river and against the current. And it feels like you're not going anywhere. It feels like you're not going to get there. But you do. You know, you will. And I just keep telling myself, I will. I have a God on my side, and I'm doing the right thing. And if I'm doing the right thing, I think my God will support me, and he'll get me through this current, because what they're doing is wrong, and they're abusing people, and they're not following the law. They're evil, you know. And I said, I'm defending the right thing. I'm doing it. It's not for I'm not getting anything out of this except retaliation, you know. Yeah. But I have the right thing, and I really do think that we will succeed, you know. And if we believe in what we're doing, and we believe in of the outcome, and like I said, it gives you power, it gives you strength, and most of all, faith. Yes, keep your faith in line, because there is no impossible for God. And if you can do it, if you're willing to do it and be used as a vessel to do it, God will use you, and you'll be successful. You'll be victorious. I read the end of the book. It says I win.
So great. I want to thank you for being with us, Connie. Thank you for the stories. And what we're leaving with today is our history, our culture, also with education. Remember to, even when it gets hard, to stay with those kids and make sure that they're raised right, because then we won't be raising our grandchildren. We'll be actually enjoying them. Yes. And with God on our side, anything is possible.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to Journey Radio. Please log on to hear the podcast. Also want to invite you to visit our sponsor, which is Divinity Beauty Bar, located at 3402 East Broadway in Tucson, Arizona, where you can get your hair done any kind of way you want to. One thing we know is that you will leave with confidence, feeling more beautiful and more divine than before. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.